honeybees are frequently brought in to fruiting vegetable crops to pollinate them and create the fruit that you sell. And it's getting harder and harder for beekeepers to manage their colonies perennially. They overwinter as a whole colony, so they collect a lot of nectar. They have to maintain themselves throughout the whole summer and the winter, and that can be stressful on bees, especially if they're being moved around to different cropping systems and are introduced to other bees that may bring in diseases, and that can accumulate each year that you have this hive existing, and it can get really hard on them. So a lot of researchers are looking into alternative pollinator options for vegetable and fruit crops, and some of those that are getting a lot of traction these days are bumblebees, which a few companies are producing commercially, one species of bee mostly, and they don't last quite as long as honeybees. They're different in that they don't spend their time collecting nectar to overwinter as a whole colony. They actually collect lots of pollen. They collect about 20 times to 40 times more pollen than honeybees do, because that's what they need to live for just that one summer. At the end of the summer, they create a bunch of queens. The queens all leave. They find their own little holes to live in, and then they create new colonies the next year. It's really different than a honeybee. And we've been finding ways to incorporate bumblebees into greenhouse crops in particular. They seem to work really well with greenhouse vegetables like cucumbers, slicer cucumbers, and tomatoes, eggplants, and most of the vine crops that you can do in a covered or controlled setting. And an interesting sort of bee class that's being developed mostly on the fruit side, but it's getting some traction in the vegetable side, are mason bees and leafcutter bees, which live as individuals. They don't live in a colony at all. A majority of the bees in the world don't actually live in colonies, but live as individual females that lay eggs. They lay eggs in their own little home. The females die, and the eggs develop all on their own and come out the next year. The leafcutter bees are another option. They live very similar to the blue orchard mason bee, but they collect. They are open. They come out of their colonies much later in the summer, and their different species sort of rotate all the way into the spring. And you can manage their populations as effectively as some of the better bees with these boards that have pre-existing holes that are drilled into them. And then you can actually take these boards apart, harvest their cocoons in November, clean them up for any pests that they have, put them in a suitable environment to survive the winter, and then the next year in the crop that you'd like to introduce them to, you prep them with some temperature treatments, and you set them out, and they hatch out, and they start the process over. This is being used in blueberries in Maryland as well, and alfalfa in Idaho and in other western countries, western states. And I see something like the leafcutter bee working with some of the outdoor vegetable crops as well, and I'm really excited to see it.